Izuku Midoriya was born in a world where he didn't fit. He never did. He was born quirkless. He was born without a power, just like all the other kids around him. He was made fun of, turned away, and even shunned. Izuku Midoriya was seen as nothing. He went from foster home to foster home after his, mother died during birth. Izuku survived. He always wondered if that was his punishment. It was technically his fault that his mother would pass and then what? Leave a boy that didn't even have a power? That didn't even have a quirk? Izuku would walk around sad every single day in his foster homes and his orphanages. He would feel that his life didn't mean much. But Izuku would hear this every day in and day out, every time he would go to school. He'd feel that, there was nowhere for him to go. Izuku didn't know what to do with his life. For a long time, he wanted to be a hero. But how far would being a hero even get him? He would sob every single day about not being gifted by whatever is out there. Not being gifted, with a quirk. He would age up, slowly but surely, and many would bully him like Katsuki Bakugo, telling him that he's useless and that without a quirk he would never become a hero. But Izuku would hear this so much that he'd feel, why would he even want to become one? Why would he choose to become a hero? And it all came down to that fateful day. The day that Izuku would decide something in his mind that would change his life forever. He would be in the classroom, hear what the teacher had to say about going and being a hero. He'd be laughed at for wanting to try for UA. He'd be basically annoyed, frustrated, but he was tired. He was drained. And this was a matter of life or death. Did he care? Did he care at all? Well, for him, he was pushed to the edge. He had no family. He had no friends. And everybody that told him and talked to him called him a waste of space. Izuku would decide to take the leap. Bakugo would tell him that he's useless and that he should just jump off the roof. And you know what would entail on that. Izuku would walk toward that roof and would look down at everybody below. Izuku would wait until everyone left, but Bakugo himself questioned where Izuku was. Yes, he bullied him. Yes, he didn't care for him. He didn't care about the attitude that he portrayed. But Bakugo, did he really want to see Izuku die? Of course not. But there's consequences to your actions and consequences to your words. Izuku would step off that building, go plummeting down, and he seemed content. He seemed okay with what was going on. He would slam into the ground, and it is as if the spirit of himself, shot straight out of him. Izuku's outer body would just disappear in a way. It felt like a matter of seconds. Izuku's spirit would burst out of his body, travel around at hyper speeds. His body would lay there, and as Izuku entered his body once again, it was like a flash of light, and he was back in a hospital bed, seemingly okay. Izuku isn't sure what just occurred and isn't sure what just happened, but everybody would quickly surround him. Doctors and people that he never recognized in his life. Who are these people? What's even going on? Just as those people came, they went, disappeared into nothingness. Izuku would watch as they would poof into this white smoke, one after another. More would run in, more would go. He would then feel that his body would slip from consciousness and he'd reawaken once again in a different hospital bed, a different room, it seemed. But just as he got up from the chair or off the bed, he began to walk around. looking for anybody. Nobody was there. Everything was completely gone. Every single person was no longer in the building. There was clothing all scattered around. Izuku would feel this rush of power within him, but at the same time would feel ill, would feel disgusted. Izuku would slowly walk out the building to see everything going on exactly the same. What, is he dead? Is he alive? What even happened? Izuku continues to walk until he eventually comes across a small TV. That TV plays a news story saying that a young boy by the name of Izuku Midoriya took his own life. Classmates, everybody begin to speak about how Izuku was and how he never showed any signs of this. Well, Izuku knew that he showed so many signs. He knew that this was going to basically go on. Izuku was over it, but nonetheless, he wasn't even sure what was happening. Was it some outer body experience, or was he actually still alive? Izuku would continue to walk, but people would walk by him as if he wasn't even there. Would walk by him as if nothing was even happening. Izuku would eventually arrive at an alleyway. Approaching the alleyway, he'd see a couple people there, a couple of these random hooligans, and they began to walk up to him, stop him in his tracks, and began to say, ask where the hell does he think he's going? Izuku is shocked to see this, thinking that maybe he was in some weird state of mind, or maybe he was in some weird state. Izuku was being seen by these people, and now he was being threatened. Maybe those people out there that were walking by him didn't care, felt like he was to be ignored. These three hooligans began to walk over to rough him up, basically show that he shouldn't have walked down this alleyway. But in a matter of seconds and a matter of a blink, they were all three on the ground, completely stripped of their life and not breathing by any means. Izuku would be shocked, but could feel this life force energy just drilling back into himself. He leaves the bodies there and just continues to walk and walk. Eventually, he would have come across these people. Izuku would look at them and wonder if they're going to hurt him, try to hurt him, or if he would have to take lethal action. But they don't say a word until they walk up to him and they put a hand out. This hand would reach out to Izuku for a handshake. A glove covering his hand. Izuku would be in shock as a man, introduces himself. He introduces himself as Overhaul, and he is the leader of the Shie Hassaikai. And he knows exactly who he is, and he wants to know, what exactly is he? Izuku is confused, but decides to follow this man, eventually leading them to a hideout. Izuku would say that he jumped off the building, but he just woke up in that same hospital that was nearby. And Overhaul questions the, three men that were on the ground. And Izuku says that he used his powers of some sorts to kill them. Of course, Overhaul is shocked. What exactly is his powers? Izuku doesn't even know. But luckily, Overhaul, being far more than just a gang leader, has these advanced doctors on standby. Of course, they can kind of diagnose in a way what his quirk may be. Izuku telling him that he was born quirkless, but Overhaul does say that immense trauma or something occurring, or being a late bloomer, it is something that happens in terms of quirks. Tests would eventually be run on Izuku, but honestly, Overhaul makes him feel as if he actually has a home. Frankly, making him feel like there's nothing extremely wrong with running these tests. They would eventually learn of his quirk, and it all has to do with his experience with death. It seems like he has the ability to manipulate life energy, or the ability to live in general. There's a theory that the doctor eventually has that he might be able to even create life from nothingness. Izuku might be able to revive the dead, It might sound something like far-fetched, but it seems like the more he kills and the more he stores within himself as life energy, the longer and stronger he'll get. That's at least what it seems like. Overhaul is astounded by this revelation and introduces everybody on his team, and eventually introduces Izuku and asks him to join the Shie Hassaikai, their gang. Izuku has nowhere else to go, so he decides that he'll stay. Why not? Izuku would begin training with some of the members of the Shie Hassaikai, learning how to use his powers better and better, learning that his powers were very distinct. He can more or less take the life from anybody he chooses, but the only thing is he needs to make sure his emotions always stay in check. If he can't do that, well, then he'll actually have to manipulate life energy in a different way, allowing himself to be far stronger, but at the cost of his lifespan. Of course, Izuku has an extremely long lifespan right now because he's been killing others and taking their life force. But when he starts manipulating it to the point where he can just give out crucial blows and blows that will extremely hurt people, well, he won't be able to hold on to those extra years, decades of life. Nonetheless, these missions would go pretty easily. Izuku would be assigned to gather materials or get anything he can possibly think of, and that was a matter of just invading small buildings, killing whoever needed to be killed, and Izuku would handle that with ease, keeping his emotions in check and instantly sapping the life force out of everybody he sees. Izuku would continue doing this, getting all of these materials that were said, and soon he would see, well, during one of his rests, he'd see the TV flash on and it began to play the UA Sports Festival. He'd watch the UA Sports Festival after, well, we can talk about maybe almost a year and a half or something like that of basically working for Overhaul. He'd watch the UA Sports Festival on the TV like he did when he was little, when he was in an orphanage. He'd watch it and he'd see some people that he'd recognize, but one stuck out like a sore thumb. Katsuki Bakugo. He stood there like, well, he was so much better than everybody else, and that speech that he gave showed that. It would grind Izuku's mind, grind his gears, get him so frustrated, but he would calm down, relax. Eventually, Overhaul would approach Izuku while he's watching this, questioning if he still wants to be a hero. Izuku says there is no heroes in this line of work. He doesn't care anymore. He begins to question what Overhaul wants, and Overhaul smiles, saying that they've had a bit of a revelation, and that involves someone by the name of Eri, a girl with a magnificent amount of power. He then tells Izuku that he wants him to relate to her, get her to more or less help in these experiments. Izuku shrugs and says, why not? But he would definitely question that agreement once, well, he figured out who Eri was and what she was. He would realize that Eri was just a little child, a child that was basically clean, nothing wrong with her. This girl supposedly had a gifted quirk, but it was a curse at the same time. Izuku would hear in the distance many souls that were gone because of Eri. He can feel the life force basically within her. Izuku would approach her and comfort Eri, making her feel at home to the best of his ability, saying that when he was younger, not many people liked him either. But now she can use her powers for something greater. She can be something greater. Izuku didn't know what he was doing at the time, but he was giving Eri hope. Giving her hope that maybe she was doing the right thing. Maybe what she was doing could actually save people. Well, she was a little child. She didn't know any better. And maybe to a certain extent, Izuku didn't know any better either. They began to take blood from Eri over and over and over again as if it was torture. And soon, she would realize that this was not going to help people. This was only going to hurt them. Izuku would watch on, And every time Overhaul would take blood from Eri, would destroy and then reconvene her at his convenience, he would get frustrated and he'd wonder, what was this? What did he really get himself into? He tried to take his life away just for it to be saved by some unknown quirk, but a child like Eri has the chance at a life that he never had, and he's gonna take it away from her by allowing this to happen? Izuku's mind begins to race, and his mindset begins to change, and his body begins to overflow with power. Overhaul is currently with Eri, and as he's about to experiment once again, Izuku walks in, walking up to Overhaul, and with one punch to the chest, but his emotions not in check, he hurts Overhaul extremely bad. He spits up blood everywhere, and he slams into the wall, collapsing almost unconscious. Izuku grabs Eri and runs off as fast as possible, not ever to look back. Izuku leaves, and he knows exactly where the Shie Hassaikai base is, and other bases alike. Izuku would eventually head to an unknown area, an unknown building, and would eventually arrive there and hide with Eri. They'd hide out for days. Days would lead into weeks. Izuku trying to fend for himself and basically have food for Eri and basically have a decent life. Izuku would quickly become what was known to be a vigilante. He would get food, money, anything they could possibly think of, and eventually it would lead to them more or less coming across some heroes that he didn't know much about. He would be in his home for now. Izuku would be basically waiting with Eri to basically find his next point in time to go get some more food and stuff for them. But he hears a creak, and then heroes approach quickly. He tries to hide initially, but one is already hot on his trail, and Izuku stands his ground right in front of him. Aizawa, or who the heroes know him as Eraserhead, grabs Izuku with his scarf, but Izuku grabs the scarf and gets ready for a fight, bringing his arm forward, but Eri grabs onto his leg and shakes her head, trying to get him not to fight. Izuku lets go and begins to question what he wants. Aizawa says that he knows that he took from the stores, and many stores actually, but he didn't know about that, pointing toward Eri, and Izuku pats her on the head, saying that this girl, is someone that he's protecting. If you're gonna do something, at least give her a better life and put him in jail, whatever. Izuku seemingly not like he cares, or seems like he doesn't care at all, but Aizawa offers him another choice. He's young. He can still be a hero. Izuku isn't so sure about this, but Aizawa says that it would be better for her, that you get her a better place, and then Izuku has a chance at least doing something with his life. He assumes that he has some sort of strong quirk if he was able to do what he was able to do. Izuku looks at him. You don't know who I am, don't you? Nobody does, huh? Izuku puts his head down and shakes it. You really don't. None of you do. That's how fast it just blows over. Aizawa is shocked to hear this and looks at him again. You're that kid. The one that jumped off that roof. Yeah, jumped off the roof. Someone told me to do it. And I know what you're about to say. Well, I mean, it was still your choice. But at the end of the day, it didn't feel like a choice anymore. Izuku looks at Aizawa dead in his eyes, and Aizawa walks up to him and pats him on the shoulder. Look, kid, I'm not here to judge you about your past life choices. And frankly, I'm sure there was a lot to lead up to you doing that. But I want to give you a better chance now. Give you an opportunity. Now, would you take it? Izuku contemplates, and eventually would accept. Eri and him would head to UA, and at least Eri would have a place to stay and eventually would be, okay. Izuku would then conversate with Aizawa a little bit about where he came from and about what he's done so far. Aizawa saying that there is redemption in him, he's just a kid, but they also need to know this information about Overhaul from the Shie Hassaikai. Of course, Izuku gives him that information, helping out the best he possibly can, but obviously the base of the Shie Hassaikai would be quickly moved after Izuku escaped with Eri. And obviously they have no idea where Izuku even went. Izuku would eventually move into these dorms, or at least this on-campus housing, and he would get settled in and get ready for his first day. But just as he walks out and heads to his classroom, he would enter his classroom with a dull look on his face, but when he steps through the door, he sees somebody. Chills go down his spine, and anger rushes to his face. Him. He didn't realize it, and he's not sure how, but Bakugo is here. He's pissed. He realizes that this kid, he's the reason why. Izuku stares daggers into Bakugo as he walks toward his quote-unquote seat, and Bakugo himself realizes exactly who he is. Bakugo can feel this ominous, dark presence behind him, as if there was this lingering demon over him. Izuku sits in the back of the class as Aizawa eventually enters, explaining exactly what is going to be going on. Explaining that, well, they have a new student by the name of Izuku Midoriya. He sits there, and some classmates actually realize where he came from, and a blue-haired boy by the name of Tenya Ida, dumb as he is sometimes, will immediately point out that he was the kid that jumped off that roof that day. Izuku wouldn't say a word, and Aizawa would tell him to shut up. That is none of his business, and that is not something they should be bringing up at this point. Izuku then basically crosses his arms. Who cares? Let's bring it up. Why not, right? Let's bring up how a lot of you didn't even realize I was the kid that jumped off that roof. How I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for, well, some very, very good coincidence. And let's also talk about why I jumped off that roof. How these people treated me. Let's also talk about how your star student, Katsuki Bakugo, told me to jump off that roof. Even though he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what I was going through. He knew what my life was, but he still thought it was good for him and good for me to tell me that I was a waste of space and that I should jump off that roof. Izuku says these things, and Bakugo is in complete shock. He doesn't even know what to say. The rest of the class stare at Bakugo, waiting for an answer, but an answer would not come. Nothing would come. Nothing would be said. Eventually, Aizawa would get a grasp on what's going on, or basically get everybody focused up, especially for their little internships. Izuku would be told that he has none, obviously right now, but he would eventually. Izuku would be basically talked about by many, and Aizawa would eventually get him an internship, and it's with someone extremely high profile, but obviously for the reason why you may all expect. Izuku would get offered an internship with Sir Nighteye, someone that he knows and was pretty fond of when he was growing up. But the only issue is he's not there because of his abilities or his capabilities. He's only there because of his, well, connection with the Shie Hassaikai. And he would meet Nighteye, speak with him, learn about some things, and he would give all the information he could. But as soon as Nighteye would activate his quirk, looking at Izuku, well, there was nothing to look at. There was no past, there was no future, there was nothing. Izuku was like a walking dead body. Why wasn't he able to see anything? He doesn't say anything to Izuku about this, but Izuku can feel this presence. This weird aura around Nighteye, as if he's concerned or at least, well, not knowing what's happening. Izuku would look at him confused and question what's going on. He would say that his quirk would have told him what happens to him later. Well, Izuku later. But there was just nothing. Nothing at all. Izuku was transparent, gone. He didn't exist. Izuku was confused to hear this, but nonetheless, what is it? There's no difference. He's been like that his whole life. He's never existed. He walked out of the door, and Nighteye is complete shock. This kid, what kind of torture, what kind of mind games has he gone through? What is he still going through? What kind of demons are in his head to make him feel the way he does? Nonetheless, Izuku would begin his little training with Nighteye. Nighteye got what he wanted out of him, but at the same time, he believes Izuku has potential to do far more than anyone possibly could realize. But quickly as all of that training would go, one night Izuku would be gone. One night Izuku would just disappear. He'd be walking down the alleyway, down the streets, and one man would approach him once again and tell him that he only has one choice, and that's to guide and get Eri back for him. Izuku looks toward Overhaul and shakes his head. A choice, huh? Trust me, I have a choice now. That is a promise. You don't scare me. Not one bit. If you even come near me, Eri, or anyone, I promise I'll sacrifice myself to make sure that you sit calmly in a grave. Well, now that's said, I'll be leaving. I'm sure I'm about to get in trouble for sneaking out at night, but I just knew. I can smell you from a mile away, the dead bodies that follow in your wake. It's crazy, but I promise you, every single one of those souls will wake up, feast on your flesh, and I'll be controlling them. Because I realized something, Overhaul. I realized something pretty quickly. That you didn't help me. All you did was help yourself. Immediately, Overhaul takes off a glove and goes to basically kill Izuku. But as he touches Izuku, his hand goes through him. And in a matter of just basically spirit or dust, and the white cloud begins to emerge and just disappear. Izuku wasn't actually there, just portraying himself there, and he's currently on the other side of the street. He looks at Overhaul, and just as he does, he walks away and just leaves amongst the mist in the night. Arriving back at the Nighteye agency the next day, not a word would be said, but Nighteye would see on cameras and see the meeting with Overhaul. Nighteye doesn't know what happened, and he questions Izuku, and he says that he wasn't able to take Overhaul in now. He wouldn't have been able to, but he'll make sure Overhaul doesn't come near them, because there's more than just Izuku who realizes, well, what Overhaul has done. The souls, the spirits, and life itself knows what Overhaul is capable of and what is done, or what he's done. And he'll make sure that he doesn't do it ever again. And he'll make sure that if he even tries, well, he'll handle it. Izuku is about to basically ask about what's next, but Nighteye says that they have to cut their, well, internship short. Not because of this whole incident, but because of something else. Speaking of life or death, there's been a death, well, in the UA classroom. Class 1A has lost their very own Tenya Ida. Izuku is finally sent back to UA. He's beginning to question this whole, well, what was this whole thing even about? They wanted to capture Overhaul, but they didn't even keep him there long enough to fulfill that idea. Izuku obviously doesn't have the at least the legal way of basically trying to capture villains, but why does it even matter? Someone like Overhaul is a big deal. They should just allow him to help out. Of course, it's not that simple. In terms of legality, he can't just go around doing that. Izuku would finally arrive at UA, and he'd hear exactly what happened to Tenya Ida. Exactly what happened, well, to him, and basically what the hero killer completely mutilated him, killed him. Izuku is sitting there, and he even can feel the spirit of Tenya Ida around, being able to sense his body even in the nearby hospital that was trying to be saved at one point, but unfortunately he is passed away. Izuku begins to question himself slightly. Can Yue really protect anybody? He even questions this to Aizawa as they're getting ready for their final exams, and of course, Izuku being a smart kid, he wouldn't have that much trouble, but overall, he just wants to know. He even has a conversation with Aizawa about Eri. Is she okay? And if anything is going on, and Aizawa says everything is fine. Her quirk has been kind of firing off here and there, but they've been okay. And, well, Ida, you guys couldn't have stopped it. Anything? Of course, Aizawa says no. He put himself in a situation that he couldn't get out of, and it was just him not being so heroic. He was doing something that he wasn't supposed to be doing, and it caused him to lose his life. Izuku thinks about that for a second, and even looks toward two people. He looks toward Katsuki Bakugo, and then also Shoto Todoroki, questioning those two kids right there, the two people that he's pointing at. Aizawa asks, what is he talking about? He brings up the fact of what Bakugo did, and of course Aizawa has heard it in the class and heard it yesterday in that, or days ago in the classroom, but Izuku wants to bring this to light. How can someone like him be a hero? If someone as structured as Tenya Ida, of at least from what he knows, was able to flip that mindset in an instant, how could they trust Katsuki Bakugo to do something? Look at Shoto Todoroki, someone that has been tortured by his own demons. Immediately, Aizawa questions how he even knew that, and Izuku begins to say that he can tell when someone is broken into pieces, and those pieces can't be reattached so easily. Izuku continues to question every last person in Class 1A. Izuku once again looks at Aizawa and nods, saying that he understands that he may not have all the answers. He understands that not everybody in Hero Society is and will be recorded as a hero like the one and only All Might. He gets that, and he understands that. But they should definitely keep an eye on some of these people that think that being a hero, well, you can be lenient with how you act. Izuku just walks away, and that was really about it. That conversation was so odd, so brief, but at the same time, it was so true. But Aizawa stops him before he can completely leave, and he says that there is no quote-unquote final exam for him. That unfortunately, well, like how he probably assumed, he'll be doing some more work with the whole Overhaul case. Izuku shrugs his shoulders and says that's fine. If that's his quote-unquote final exam, he'll head over to the agency in no time. He'll finish up his written exam and do whatever he has to do and then head over. Aizawa agrees, and that eventually happens. But before he would leave, he would visit Eri, beginning to see how she is, see how she's feeling, and basically how everyone is treating her. They're treating her great, which Izuku is happy to hear. But quickly, Izuku, when he leaves, well, let's just say he won't be showing up at the doorstep of Night-Eye's. And not that simple. Izuku would be gone, and frankly, he'd never show up there at all. Knowing that Eri has a good place for him, or a good place for herself, and that she'll be safe with the heroes, Izuku knows what he needs to do. And he knows what the heroes won't do. And that's do, well, the right thing by all or any means necessary. Izuku begins to head over to a nearby hospital, a hospital that he knew that the young man by the name of Tenya Ida would currently be at. He would approach this area that his family is currently sitting at. Just outside his door, he would raise his hand up and he'd slump to the ground and wake up once again as if he just lost a whole life's worth of energy. And out of nowhere, Tenya Ida would gasp for air and sit straight up as if he was alive. And that's because he is. He was alive. Izuku would revive Ida and would be gone in seconds. Nobody available to even see that Izuku even did that. But that is the last thing he'll do for them. He doesn't really care anymore, and he wants to handle business how it needs to be handled, and that's with Overhaul. He would head out and head to that same alleyway that he knew Overhaul would be waiting for him. He could feel it. He knew that there were people watching him everywhere he moved, and he stood at the alleyway and spikes began running out toward him, or flowing toward him as if it was some sort of tidal wave. Izuku would jump out of the way, empowering his body to the max he can possibly do. Overhaul would begin his fights and basically wanting to kill Izuku, telling him that he'll strip everything away from him and then he'll go get Eri and make sure she suffers in his place as well after he dies. Here's the thing, Overhaul. There's one big thing you're missing. I've been dead for a little while now. What you don't understand is that you have a choice. You can either live, well, basically as a potato, or die and go to hell. Izuku would then walk toward Overhaul as spikes rush toward him, but it's as if the aura in front of him, all of this energy that's been built up from the people around him dying, or just him killing people on his own, begins to shatter every last bit of it. He walks toward Overhaul and he grabs him by the throat as energy begins to sap from his body, as if every single soul Overhaul has ever killed, annihilated, or anything begins to just be sapped and controlled by Izuku. Izuku continues to do this over and over until he was a shriveled up body made of nothingness. He would drop the clothes on the ground and Izuku would look to his left to see Nighteye and many others there waiting for him. Izuku looked at them and shook his head. He said that if they come close, they'll die. There's nothing around that. He smiles and says, "Take care of Eri. Make sure to give her a good life. Something that I'm too young to give her, and frankly, something that this pile of garbage would never have." Izuku begins to walk away, and Mirio begins to use his quirk to close the distance, but immediately he'd be shot backwards, as if there was some force field revolving around Izuku, as if the power from the life that he just drained from Overhaul's body was so much that he couldn't even get close. Izuku would look toward them as he began to fade out of existence in some fact. He was disappearing and leaving somewhere else, but Izuku would look at them as this dark cloud would arrive above him and then would disappear within him once again. He would disappear as if he just vanished from nowhere, but he was gone. He was ready to start again, but not as a hero. He realized that being a hero didn't matter to him. What mattered to him was justice. What mattered to him was to follow the philosophies of All Might himself. But guess what? This way, he would actually make sure that the villains would stay down, and would stay down forever. Izuku made a home base, eventually getting a place for himself, somewhere that nobody would even track him. Of course, he was wanted for the murder of Overhaul and the murder of many others, and Izuku would just be unknown and make sure to basically cover his tracks perfectly, and he began to learn more and more about how to do this. Izuku would wait, bide his time, and slowly wait for things to arrive. His next goal was somebody that he felt needed to go down, and he's been tracking him for a while. Knowing that he's about to show up, Izuku would go meet with him. But unfortunately, when he would meet with him, many others would be there as well. But Izuku would be patient, wait, and eventually he'd be alone once again. The man, the myth and the legend himself, Stain, the hero killer, would stand right in front of Izuku, and Izuku would look at Stain. He would say that he's interesting. Kill heroes that didn't know the actual way of being a hero. Izuku looked at him and says that sometimes, as a true hero, I guess you can call him a vigilante, you need to kill those who truly are bad. Why doesn't he go after the villains that make these heroes look so bad? Why doesn't he do the hero's job? In which Stain kind of scoffs at, saying that if he eliminates all these false heroes, maybe there finally will be heroes to actually fight against villains how it should be. Izuku kind of shakes his head and begins to say that he can't allow him to kill any more heroes, especially ones that actually are good heroes. He begins to speak about Ingenium, about his younger brother, and his younger brother was seeking vengeance, and that's not very heroic. Izuku knows this. Luckily, he has a second chance. Stain looks at him confused. Second chance? What the hell are you talking about, kid? Well, what you don't understand is you don't know me. You don't understand me, you don't understand how my power works, and you don't understand, well, the predicament you're currently in. Stain begins to take one step backwards, but it's as if this course of electricity is right behind him. He can't move. He's stuck. Me and you, we're gonna have a nice talk, Mr. Stain. Me and you, we're gonna go a while. Let's see what you got. Seriously. Stain charges forward, but it begins to feel as if he was some sort of rabid, caged animal bouncing off the walls, getting stunned more and more by every single wall he runs into. Stain is stuck, trapped. Izuku refuses to let him leave, using any bit of life energy within him to keep him encapsulated and stuck right there. Don't worry, I'll take the burden of every soul, every life you took. Because, honestly, I'm the new brand of hero. I'm the new version of All Might. Stain begins to get frustrated stabbing through this barrier, but it's not able to do anything. He even gets hurt even more because of this, saying that there is no other All Might. All Might is one of a kind. All Might is what heroes should be. Don't worry, I'll be killing every last one of these villains. I'll make sure that they don't ever step face in Japan ever again. And then I'll make my way to the US. Then I'll make my way to everywhere else. Anywhere you can possibly think of, anywhere you can think there's even a villain nearby. I'm going to be there. Izuku now has Stain entirely trapped in this box, as if he's some sort of token, some sort of stuffed animal. Well, Stain, I'll be seeing you, man. I'll be seeing you in hell. I'm sure that's where I'll be going. But I'm fine with that. I've been living in hell for the last 15 years or so. But I just want you to know, whoever you were talking to initially, they're going to be getting the same treatment as well. Because I'm coming for everybody. And as long as you realize that, I hope you can rest easy. Well, try to at least. I heard it's hot down there this time of year. Izuku begins to sap every last soul out of Stain, basically destroying his body just like he did Overhaul, leaving nothing there. Just as he thinks that it's over and it's done, though he drops the body of Stain, as a knife begins flying toward him with, well, someone attached to that same knife. He dodges with ease and tells that same girl that just lunged at him that she can still make a better choice. I mean, of course, that is her choice after all. But if Izuku sees her again, there won't be redemption. Izuku basically steps one more time and he poofs into a cloud of nothingness and he's gone. Back at his hideout once again, and the League of Villains have just been put on notice. They've been just banded together fully, and their plans seem to be a little shaky with the idea of this person now wrapping around. The idea that this person is now around in Japan may lead to some struggle. Nonetheless, Izuku would lay low for a little bit, move around here and there, make sure that his tracks were completely sealed. Eventually, he would hear on the news about some things, though, about a young boy being captured, someone his age, and he learns it to be Katsuki Bakugo, eventually leading to a press conference. He watches this press conference, and he watches as Aizawa speaks to everybody. Listen, we all know what it looks like, and we know what happened, but we promise we're working day in and day out to find this child, to find Bakugo, to make sure that he is fine, safe, and that he's what the... Just as Aizawa is speaking about this, Izuku taps into his life energy and begins to just trade places with him, as if his spirit has just swapped. And now Izuku sits right in front of everybody. Aizawa being out in the middle of the streets from right by the nearby building. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you, Izuku Midoriya. You probably haven't heard about me. I've, been around, entered UA for a little bit, made some mistakes that really weren't mistakes. Now, I want to speak about Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki Bakugo is an interesting case. Do I think he would turn over to the villain side? I'm not so sure. Probably not. Just as he's saying this, some heroes go to grab him, but immediately this force field around him pushes them away. You might want to calm down. You heroes might be strong, but there's a lot of people in this room, and I really don't want that many bodies on my conscience. Good. Now that we're all acquainted, I want all of you guys to know that Mr. Aizawa is right. You won't have to worry about him. You won't. I think Katsuki Bakugo is interesting, maybe a little too outgoing in terms of anger, and frankly shouldn't be a hero at all. But a villain? I'm not sure if I'd call him that. I think I'd call him uneducated, an idiot, someone I really wish I could kill. But of course, I do believe in some sort of redemption. So I'm gonna go get Katsuki Bakugo for you guys. Sounds good? I'll see you in a bit. Izuku disappears out of nowhere. Everybody in a state of shock, and Aizawa runs in from the outside, wondering where Izuku would have gone. How? Immediately, they begin to talk about how, Izuku is already gone. He's already headed over there, and currently, he's at the doorstep of, let's just say, these villains. Izuku is ready for a fight and begins to knock, or is about to knock on the League of Villains door, just as he hears many other heroes approach. Their raid is about to begin as well, and Izuku got in there so stealthily that nobody even noticed him. So he waits on top of a building, waiting to see how things unfold, and the heroes execute the plan perfectly. He's shocked and surprised. Frankly, he didn't have to do anything, but there might be a reason for that. All Might. All Might must have led this charge, and as he looks, that's the case. But just as he looks, it seems that Bakugo gets covered in this black goo, and he's transported away. Now, where did he go? Someone else is at play here, huh? I can feel it. I can sense him. Immediately, Izuku leaves and begins to sit on a nearby building where the fight of a century is about to happen. All Might versus All for One. He watches as All Might begins to fight him, trying to get to them to safety. Izuku watches as these League of Villains try to grab Bakugo. He sits there watching Bakugo dodge, bob, and weave. But he knows that, he won't be able to get out of there. Izuku would then appear in front of Bakugo as all of the other villains charge at them. But they're stopped by the barrier that Izuku uses, and Bakugo is shocked. What the hell are you doing here? Well, honestly, I'm not sure either. Frankly, I was thinking maybe I should just kill you. But like I said, and to the news people, redemption is a thing that probably exists. So I'm gonna give you that. Mr. Katsuki Bakugo, I have to ask, why exactly did you tell me to jump off that roof that day? Why exactly did you treat me like dirt? Izuku begins to question him more and more, and Bakugo seemingly shuts down. He doesn't even know what to say, but it seems like this overwhelming force begins to compel him to tell the truth. Bakugo begins to say all of these things. Everything. Anything he can think of. And, it's all true. He feels that he basically is inferior in some way to some of these people, that he needs to overcompensate, that he needs to be the best hero possible. He needs to prove to everybody that he can, and that he's had this mindset forever, and maybe it has something to do with everybody calling him great, amazing all the time. Maybe that messed with his head. And Bakugo basically says all of these things, and Izuku eventually would sit there and look at him. Interesting. Are you sorry? Bakugo's eyes grow wide. What? Of course I'm sorry. Bakugo begins to basically slightly cry, and Izuku looks at him. Interesting. Okay. Well then, Bakugo. Your friends are coming here. They're actually in the nearby city. Go say hi to them for me. I won't be back, but say that I sent my wishes, and best of thanks. Maybe this will give some clarity for myself and yourself. Goodbye, Bakugo. Izuku waves his hands waves him goodbye as if Bakugo's going to basically leave. Bakugo's confused and is about to ask how is he going to go, but out of nowhere, that same white mist that covers Izuku makes Bakugo disappear. Izuku would turn around and look toward the League of Villains. Now for you all, your big boss up there better make a choice. Send you away, or I'm gonna kill you. Right now. Izuku begins to take one step forward, and the ground itself shatters, as if Izuku is outputting insane amounts of power. He's sapped so many souls and life and all of this life energy that it seems to be overwhelming and frankly overwhelming him. Izuku's so angered with the idea of the League of Villains and everything going on, but just as he thinks about these things, they're all teleported away in a matter of seconds. Izuku looks up toward All For One and looks up toward All Might. All Might is in complete shock and is hoping that Izuku doesn't try and take the side of All For One, but that's the last thing Izuku would do. Izuku would then begin to float up toward the area and look at All For One, flick him on the face or on the mask, and All For One would try to grab him, but Izuku would just fade right through his hand, going back toward All Might. You look worn out, Symbol of Peace. It's unfortunate. You seem tired, worn out. Honestly, you might die. Don't worry, you won't. Izuku would pat him on the shoulder, and it's as if All Might gets this revolutionary strength out of nowhere. His power begins to be regained and brought back to life in a way. He bulks up once again, and it feels like his wound on his side has changed, has been stripped away, and it doesn't even exist. All Might looks up and clenches his fist toward All For One. By the way, All For One, this should be fun for you. All Might is pretty close to his prime right now. Unfortunately, I don't have enough years on my life to make him strong like his prime. But let's just say you're in for a rude awakening, and I don't even have to send you there. Good luck. Izuku would disappear, and the fight between All For One and All Might would be so lopsided, it would end in a matter of seconds. All Might handles his business and handles the fights, and a search party begins to look for Izuku over and over and over again. But he's gone. He's no longer there. They wonder where he went and when he'll even show up next. Izuku would sit and watch the news as All Might would defeat All For One, and the League of Villains would be at large, and so would himself. He'd wait and wait and wait. Wait for his opportunity, wait for his chance. And with Overhaul gone, with All For One locked away, there was only a couple left he had to deal with. And the main goal was the League of Villains and Shigaraki. That's who he had to deal with, and that's who he was going to deal with. But that will be in the finale of What If Deku Had Life Energy Manipulation. Izuku Midoriya. He's been more or less scouting out anything he can possibly find. Anything that he could possibly use. He begins to believe that all of these souls, these lives, everything he's done so far, it all matters to a larger portion and a larger extent than anybody could possibly believe. Izuku believes that every soul that he's taken from every single villain, every single person, it will always matter. He allowed All For One to be captured. He gave All Might the strength to basically bring All For One down, and maybe All Might can now, defeat villain after villain at least a little bit longer. Izuku can assume that even with his injury and the loss of One For All, obviously the loss of a quirk that he would definitely notice eventually because of his lack of life energy, Izuku would know that there would be limits to All Might after maybe a year. But nonetheless, we would get a pretty strong All Might in the time being. Izuku would continue on with his agenda though, and that was hunting down the League of Villains. He believed that the only real way to hunt down the League of Villains would be to draw them out. He would need to somehow find out where they are and when they're doing certain things, and eventually that's exactly what would show up. Izuku would find that, let's just say, a little training or testing would be going on. It seems that Shigaraki is trying to get powerful, and when I mean powerful, I mean powerful. Shigaraki is currently being tested in the act of basically using multiple quirks, or at least going to be experimented on. So how are they going to get tested? Well, with a giant monster by the name of Gigantomachia. Exactly. It's something that Izuku wasn't exactly prepared for, but at the same time he would be scouting over the hills watching Gigantomachia thrash through them, hunting down Shigaraki. And he wonders how and what the hell the plan is, or what they're going to even do. Of course, they have their own agenda, but Izuku has his own as well. Izuku would be watching this all go down, not really thinking about much else. He realizes that there's so much more that will proceed, but at the same time, well, he needs to deal with this problem. Gigantomachia may be something that he personally can't deal with at this moment, but he does want to cut down the League of Villains down to size. Just as night would fall and everybody would hide and everybody would scatter, he begins to wander around, creeping by villain after villain. People that are there, Splinter, Dobby, Toga, everybody there begins to go radio silent. Of course, Shigaraki wonders why, but Izuku is currently in the vicinity, taking out one by one by one. He knows exactly how to get around and knows exactly how to cloak himself, and this was his only goal. His only goal was to take them out, make sure that, well, they didn't have a life to even go back to. Izuku wanted to make sure that these villains were punished promptly. Izuku would wait and abide his time, but eventually someone would get a sniff of him. Gigantomachia would find Izuku, grabbing onto him and tossing him extremely far. Izuku recovering slightly, but immediately Gigantomachia is back basically putting Izuku on the back foot. With most of the League of Villains completely, dead, with Gigantomachia and Shigaraki still alive, and seemingly Shigaraki agreeing on a temporary truce with Gigantomachia, it seems like this won't be going exactly amazingly well. But Izuku knows what he's doing. He's made some, you call them, preparations. Izuku begins to think that maybe it's time to get the heroes involved, and that would be exactly true. Izuku gave the best setup. He's already eliminated so many different heroes, and of course so many different villains that were extremely bad, and obviously some horrible heroes, but he's already eliminated so many, and he's so good at cleaning up his own tracks. But he's also good at leading someone exactly where he wants them to. A group of heroes would eventually arrive, some of the strongest in Japan, at the site of Gigantomachia and also Shigaraki. This would break out into a ginormous battle, but with the concentration only being on Shigaraki and Gigantomachia for the time being, it seems like it should fall in the favor of the heroes. But of course, they are preoccupied with Izuku as well, and Izuku warns them that if they stay preoccupied on him, that it won't go so well. Izuku continues to basically just bob and weave, not actually wanting to kill any of these heroes. These are good heroes. Why would he want to do that? He begins to even speak with some of them that he recognizes and asks about Eri and asks about how his other classmates were doing. They of course don't take him very seriously, but Izuku shrugs and says that their concept on heroes versus villains is far outdated. Nonetheless, Izuku stops running and walks up towards one of the heroes, and then eventually just walks toward Aizawa, grabbing the cuffs out of his belt and cuffing himself, telling him to take him away, that it doesn't matter. Just as this occurs, the two of them, both Gigantomachia and Shigaraki, are now captive. Aizawa is confused, and everybody else is as well. The giant, or the large group of heroes, just begins to take everybody away. Izuku beginning to get carted off with everybody else to Tartarus. Of course, this would be actually what Izuku wanted. You might be wondering, that's kind of weird. Why would he want that? Well, Tartarus has some of the most crazy and crazed villains, but it also has All for One, and soon all the villains that he needs to kill. What they don't know is they're giving Izuku the green light, and he's truly going to be the merchant of either life or death. And that's it. Izuku would walk into Tartarus. Everybody would seemingly not think much about everybody being captured. He has quirk cuffs on. He's not going to be able to use his quirk. They have him captive in something similar to what they would have All for One, completely under wraps. Izuku would sit there and wait. And wait. And wait. Eventually, he would see an opportunity, and those cuffs would fall right off. He would push them off using, well, his quirk. What they didn't realize is that his quirk is a little different. It's not 100% a quirk. It does feed off of the souls of real life people, and there's consequences to his quirk. And he's talked about it multiple times. But he sits there and he smiles. He smiles and thinks that it's the perfect time to completely cleanse Japan. Just as he thinks this, he steps on the ground, his left foot tapping one time as this ring appears around Tartarus. A bunch of alarms begin to blare, and a bubble begins to form around it. Just as this bubble closes, nobody's able to leave, and in a matter of seconds, coughs begin to be heard. Fainting, people crashing onto the ground, heartbeats stop. Everybody around him begins to drop, but more specifically, everybody and everyone that has been an irredeemable villain. Izuku has exterminated Tartarus and absorbs every last soul within himself. After doing this, his strength is immense. He blasts out the top of Tartarus itself and stands on the roof as police, heroes, everything, every single person. Izuku stands over and nods toward the heroes, thinking that he has a choice. He can choose life, or he could choose death. But frankly, he has done what he wanted to do. He has done exactly what at least he wanted to do for Japan. And now he can rest easy knowing that Japan will feel no pain. Immediately, Izuku's souls begin to be released at a rapid rate. It seems like these souls start going to hospitals and basically small homes in the poverty. It seems like every one of these souls is going to people either extremely sick or terminally ill, anything you could think of. Every life, every 100 years that Izuku had extra now disappears. Every single one. His aura that was so immense, that was so strong, begins to fade away so quickly. In a matter of seconds, Izuku would be looking off the edge, basically looking at the heroes, but when he stepped off that edge, plummeting down toward him, when he landed on the ground, he poofed into nothingness. Everybody questioned if that was his power, if that he did that, if he's really still alive, if he got away. Nobody really knew, but for some reason, many people can feel, and the people that knew him, even for a short amount of time, could tell that this was no tactical retreat. Izuku was no longer, well, alive. He was everywhere, yes. Maybe he was alive in a way, but truly in that form, he was no longer there. He was just basically giving away every last soul, every last gift, he would think, to the people that needed it most. Because at heart, Izuku knew what it meant to be a hero, but at the same time, the guidance was what he lacked when he was younger. And just how his quirk was given to him, it ended in the same way. Him stepping off that roof, getting his quirk, was one of the best things that could have happened to him, allowing him to do something he never thought he could. And it ended from the top of Tartarus, just like it did on the top of his school building. He jumped off, and his life ended. His life changed. With one leap, he was given a purpose, and with a second, he gave people a purpose. And in a way, Izuku Midoriya will be remembered as a hero by those who knew what he did. Those who, out of a miracle, were blessed by this lifespan that was taken away from them by natural disasters, taken away from them by a villain that hurt them so bad that maybe they were on the bridge of death. But Izuku chose death for himself and chose life for everybody else. And that is a wrap for What If Deku had life energy manipulation. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, a sub, and a comment down below, all that good stuff. Yeah, sorry that it's a little shorter. I know it was like 15-minute video, and it sucks. Like, I know I kind of rushed that a little bit. I'll be honest, it's hard to talk, and I really want to get this out to y'all, and this was like the ideas I had for this episode. Nonetheless, I hope y'all enjoyed, and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.